Okay, so we discussed methods. In the last video, we showed how to extract logic or a sequence of statements. It's called refactoring, and take that sequence of statements that we had inside of the main method and put them inside a method called average that we created, and then call that multiple times. Now we're going to discuss parameters and arguments. That is, how can we make our average method more flexible? How can it do more? Because when you think of averaging, you're thinking, well, I'm going to take, different numbers, a different set of numbers, or multiple numbers, and average those together. And I don't want every time I call average it to be 6. That doesn't make any sense, and that's not usable unless it's just a specific scenario where we need the value 6 to come back. So we've got to make our method, our set of statements, parameterized so that we can take different numbers and average them together. So here's what we're going to do. If you'll see here, if you look at this signature up here, string args, you've seen the word string earlier, right? That's a data type, a type of character string together. So what we do when we define our method, when we create our own methods, is when we use that method, when we call that method, if we want to give it values to work with, we can actually define those values up front and pass them in to make our method more flexible. So what I mean by this, let's say instead I define int num1, int num2, int num3 here. I've said that when I call average, now I'm going to need 3 numbers, or 3 integers, so 3 numbers, and they're going to be named num1, num2, and num3, just like we had done before. But now they could be any number that is an integer type. What I'll do now is I will create an integer called average is equal to num1 plus num2, 3, divided by 3, and write that out. Now let's try to call it like we did in the last video. Call the method. Oh, it doesn't work. It doesn't work because now our method signature, how you look at our method, how our method is defined, has changed, right? Now we have 3 values separated by commas. So let's say 5, like in our last example, 5, 6, 7. These are called parameters. These are called arguments. And these 5, 6, 7 are just the numbers that map to 3 different integers. So we defined it here. We actually used it here. So let's call average 3, 4, 5. And let's say the average of 100, 150, 200. So now let's run this. 6, 4, and 150. See, now our method doesn't just return a 6. We've written it in such a way by refactoring it, making some small changes, and saying we're going to just give me 3 different variables that are integers, and I'll use those. And these variables, when you enter this block of code, are available in these sequence of statements, and we can use them. So now let's change our method signature a little bit. You see this says static void, and then the name, the identifier of the method. we can actually return values back from our method. That is, we can pass some numbers in, some arguments in, we can do some calculations on them or some statements, and then we can give a value back to the method that's calling. So instead of having console.writeLine embedded in our average method, we're going to say void says we don't return a value. Now I can say, and you understand about data types and integers, I'm going to return an integer. And we use the return keyword, average. So now let's see what happens when we call this, or when we use this. We can call console.writeLine. We can call average 3, 4, 5. So we're calling a method inside of a method. So as we understood earlier from the earlier videos, this gets called and gets evaluated, and then that value is used, just like we did 2 plus 2 earlier with literal values. Now we're just using a method instead, and we're passing that method in like this. That'll get called, average will get called with these numbers 3, 4, and 5. That'll return 4, and then that'll get written out. And our expected output, what we'd expect, is 4. So none of these things are new. Now there are different ways of looking at things that you've already learned and how you use them. But this was instead of using 2 plus 2, now we used average and we passed that in. Now think about this. That means that writeLine, if we take it a step further, when it was defined, accepted things, different types of values, and then if you'll see here and you'll hover over it, it doesn't return anything, it just writes those values out. If it says void console.writeLine. So now you can actually read a method signature. Now you can also use it in this fashion. Int value equals average 10, 20, 30. That value gets returned. This expression, you're calling a method, returns the value, assigns it to this variable that we've defined, and then we're going to use that variable inside of console.writeLine. 20. So there's a lot happening in this video, but once again, we've introduced some new concepts, but what we're really doing is taking a lot of the things that you've already known from the other videos, understood and learned from the other videos, and combine them together and use them in a different way. So now you can define your own methods that return numbers that can take different types of data and can be used elsewhere, can be called by other methods. So a method calling another method. So we're actually going to get into some creative some creative code in the next video using just the tools that you've gained so far.